Hi, and welcome to How to Make a Bobsled. This is a two-part presentation that discusses how to make a bobsled at home from recycled or low-cost parts and has some pictures and video of how to drive a homemade bobsled. So buckle up and listen along. First, you're going to need to do some planning about materials and where you're going to use your sled and the characteristics you want it to have. Here's a little snapshot of a part of our planning process. It was an interesting and enjoyable time. It didn't necessarily turn out quite like the plans, but that's part of the fun of doing it at home. What we find is that a rain barrel makes a great body. If you don't have one available, you can try your local manufacturer or chemical company that sometimes give them away for free. Cut the body in half longitudinally for 2/3 of the length, and that will hold one adult or two kids. There's a picture of how ours looked after we cut it off. And so you can see how you would have a front section there that is the bottom of the barrel. That way you've got a nice smooth front and you can tuck your feet in there when you're riding. For runners, for hard snow, old downhill skis make great runners. For ice, we didn't try this, but old skate blades or angle iron might work. That would be a little trickier, but certainly the downhill ski approach is pretty easy. There's two ways to go about this: trial and error, which I'm going to describe here, and there's also a pre-calculated and planned approach, which would make a better method now that we've figured that out. That's described in part 2 of this presentation. The trial and error approach involved attaching an old 2x4, or we used a 2x3, ripped a 2x6 in half, along each side, part way up, between about 45 and 60 degrees from the bottom, and then measuring the angle to the vertical and cutting 4 legs out of old 2x6 to attach to this horizontal support board. We attached those, making sure that they sit vertical. We had to do a little bit of trimming and shimming to make them straight, but it's very important because if they are not really close to vertical, the skis won't be quite flat and the sled won't run straight. So I'd suggest you start with the legs longer than you want, get it trimmed to the right angles, and then cut off the ends for the length that you want to mount on the skis. So there's a couple of pictures of how ours looked after attaching the legs. You can see I've cut the angle on the right-hand picture, and I've got two 2x6 supports on each side to attach to the skis, shown in the left-hand picture. Long legs are going to add instability to your bobsled, but will let the sled run better if you hit deeper snow, whereas short legs will make it more stable, but do tend to turn the sled into a bit of a snowplow when you hit soft snow. You'll have to judge your leg length based on the snow conditions in your area. We made ours short for stability and getting out and in easily, and this allowed snow more than a few inches deep to break the sled, but the hill we were driving on was mostly very hard packed with only loose snow at the bottom, so it worked very well. With the runners, get an old pair of downhill skis. If you don't have a pair, check your neighbors and friends and take the bindings off. Then you can place the sled onto the skis and mark the outsides of the legs, drill through the skis in the middle of the markings, and then countersink the holes. Countersink the holes from the bottom so that when you screw up through into the legs, the screw heads will be recessed, which will reduce drag. I would use long deck screws. 2.5-inch work, 3-inch would work fine as well. So there's the attachment of the skis. You can see the 2 skis attached in the left-hand picture. In the right-hand, you can see the 3 screws going into the one 2x4 slightly inset. If you can't get them quite inset, you can always grind down the head a little bit with an angle grinder, but that risks damaging the ski a bit more, so I would be very cautious with that approach. There you see the legs. You can see that they're actually quite parallel, which is good, as they stick out the back there. We mounted our sled quite a ways forward on the skis. No particular reason, but it turned out very well because that allows, if you choose to, have a person standing on the back of the skis and holding on as well, which actually allows you to carry one more person on the bobsled. Can be a little dangerous if it's a bumpy run and stuff, so I'd be a little cautious about that approach. As far as steering goes, we thought of a few things as shown here, but what we found worked the best was actually just leaning out the side and dragging your fingers on the snow. That works okay. You'll turn in the direction that you drag your fingers. The edges of the barrel are going to be a little sharp, which is why in the previous pictures you saw that they were covered with hot water pipe insulation. You can also use a pool noodle. You can add some padding in the bottom of the body. Recommended if the run is really rough, has some jumps in it maybe. But the sled does run pretty smooth because there's a bit of flex in the body. So if you're not going to be taking it airborne, you'll find you won't actually need the padding. Bobsled will go further than a toboggan, and it's harder to bail out from and to steer, so make sure you have a long clear area at the bottom of your hill. There's a number of ways to start it. You can push start it and jump in if you're coordinated and have a long flat slope at the top of the hill, or you can just jump in and start it that way, or have somebody else push start you, or hold it while you get in on the slope of the hill and then get out of the way. All those will work fine. You'll see some of those different approaches here. So here we have son number 1 in the sled starting to go down the hill, looking a little terrified, but having fun. 2 kids in the sled on the way down the hill. Number 1 in the back, number 2 in the front. Number 2 looks a little terrified, but again, I assure you, he's having a lot of fun. And then running out at the bottom of the hill. Part 2 of this presentation will have some video of the run and the technical details. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed part 1 and move on to part 2.